She looked down at that little black boy like he was already guilty. He was 9 years old. He had his own money. He had a note from his father giving him permission. He had walked straight to the shelf, picked up exactly what he came for, and walked straight to the register. And she still stopped him, blocked his path, smiled that cold, practiced smile, and asked him to open his bag. Not because of anything he did, not because of anything he said, but because of what he looked like walking through that door. What Donna Hartwell did not know, what she could not have imagined in her 18 years of working that floor, was who this child's father was. Because 32 blocks away, a man in a black suit received an 11-second phone call. He said nothing for 4 seconds, just listened. Then he stood up, buttoned his jacket, and told 3 of the most dangerous men in Manhattan to leave his office. And they left, without a single question. By the time Elijah had been sitting alone in that back room for 32 minutes, Fifth Avenue had changed. 1 black SUV pulled up, then 4, then a line that did not stop, and 100 men in black suits stepped out in silence and took the block, while the Korean Mafia boss walked through the front door, alone, calm, and completely certain of what was about to happen. What she did to that little boy that afternoon, she would never be able to undo. But what happened next, what that father did without raising his voice, without making a single threat, changed everything. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and click join to become a member and help our channel. There are moments in history that do not announce themselves. They do not arrive with drums or declarations. They do not come wrapped in the language of consequence. They come quietly, in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, in an ordinary store, on an ordinary street, dressed as nothing more than a small decision made by someone who believed they had the right to make it. This is one of those moments. Manhattan, a Tuesday. The kind of afternoon where the city moves at its usual indifferent pace. Cabs threading through gridlocked blocks, vendors calling out to no one in particular, tourists consulting paper maps while locals walk through them like ghosts. Inside the tech zone on Fifth Avenue, the fluorescent lights hum at a frequency just below noticeable. The shelves gleam. The products sit in their places like obedient soldiers. Everything is exactly where it is supposed to be. Except for the boy. He is 9 years old. He walks through the door with the particular alertness of a child who has been taught, very early, to pay attention to rooms. Not because the world is beautiful, though he believes it is, but because his father has told him, more than once, that rooms will tell you everything you need to know about the people inside them, if you learn how to listen. So he listens. He notices the security camera above the entrance angled slightly downward. He notices the guard near the back. Young, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, the way people do when they have been standing in one place too long. He notices the woman at the service counter, who looks at him and then looks away just a half-second too quickly. He notices all of it. And he walks in anyway. Because his father also told him something else. He told him that the worst thing a person can do when a room tries to make them feel small is let the room win. So Elijah O. walks to the headphone display. He takes the folded note from his jacket pocket, handwritten, slightly crumpled from being read and reread, and checks the model his father approved. Sony. White. $89. He has $120. He has had it for 3 months, tucked inside an envelope in his desk drawer, the way he tucks important things. He finds the box. He holds it with both hands, the way you hold something you have been waiting for, and he walks to the register. He does not run. He does not look over his shoulder. He does not rehearse excuses or explanations, because he does not believe he needs any. This is the detail that history will later struggle to process. Not the injustice. The world has seen injustice cataloged and archived and eulogized 1,000 times over. What history will struggle with is simpler than that. What history will struggle with is that the child did everything right. He entered. He selected. He proceeded to payment. Every movement was correct, careful, and calm. There was no ambiguity. There was no gray area. There was only a 9-year-old boy with his own money buying a product he had saved for, in a store open to the public, in the middle of the afternoon, in one of the most surveilled buildings on that block. And it still was not enough. The woman's name is Donna Hartwell. She has worked in this store for 18 years. She has a system, she will later explain, a set of intuitions built from nearly 2 decades of watching the floor. She trusts those intuitions the way a person trusts a habit, without examining it too closely, without asking where it came from, without considering what it might look like from the outside. In her mind, she is not making a decision rooted in prejudice. She is doing her job. She is protecting the store. She steps in front of Elijah before he reaches the register. She smiles the particular smile of someone who has decided the conversation is already over. And she asks him to open his bag. What Donna Hartwell does not know, what she cannot know, because nothing in her 18 years has prepared her for it, is that 32 blocks away, in a building with no visible signage and 3 layers of security, a man in a black suit is about to receive an 11-second phone call. And after that phone call, nothing about this Tuesday will be ordinary anymore. There is a particular kind of silence that falls over a room when power enters it. Not the silence of emptiness, not the silence of absence, the silence of recalibration. The moment when every person in a space, without fully understanding why, adjusts their posture, lowers their voice, and begins to pay very close attention to where the exits are. That silence arrived in the tech zone 11 seconds after Tyler Baines made his call. It arrived before any car pulled up, before any door opened, before a single man in a black suit set foot on Fifth Avenue. It arrived because Donna Hartwell, standing in the back hallway outside the room where she had placed a 9-year-old boy to wait, looked at the security monitor above the service desk and saw the street outside begin to change. 1 black SUV, then 2, then 4, then a line of vehicles that did not stop arriving, pulling to the curb with the kind of unhurried precision that suggested the drivers had done this before, had rehearsed it, had performed it enough times that urgency had been replaced by choreography. She watched the doors open. She watched the men step out. She watched them take their positions on the sidewalk, not clustered, not chaotic, but spread in formation, shoulder to shoulder, facing outward, filling the block the way water fills a container, perfectly, completely, without a single wasted movement. 100 men, black suits, no expression. Donna Hartwell had managed this store through 2 robberies, a fire alarm evacuation, and a protest that had briefly blocked the entrance for 4 hours. She had never once lost her composure. She prided herself on it. She would later be unable to explain why her hand was shaking when she set down her coffee cup. The man who entered the store alone was not physically extraordinary. He was tall, yes, but not the tallest man in any room he had ever entered. His suit was impeccable, but so were the suits of 100 other men who passed through Manhattan on any given Tuesday. What was extraordinary about Che Wan-oh was something that did not photograph well and could not be easily described. It was the specific quality of his stillness. He did not scan the room the way a nervous person scans a room. He absorbed it, cataloged it in a single unhurried sweep of dark eyes, and then he was done. He knew everything he needed to know, and he had already decided what was going to happen. Tyler Baines walked 2 steps behind and to the left. He did not need to speak. He did not need to signal to the men outside. Everything was already in motion. Donna stepped forward. She had prepared something to say. Something professional, something measured, something that would establish the situation on her terms before it slipped further from her grasp. She had the words ready. She opened her mouth. Chae-won-oh looked at her. She closed her mouth. He spoke first, and when he did, his voice was the calmest thing in the building. My son is here. It was not a question. It was not an accusation. It was a statement of fact delivered with the quiet certainty of a man who has never once needed to raise his voice to be believed. Donna understood, in that moment, with a clarity she would describe much later as almost physical, that she was not being threatened. She was being informed. And somehow that was worse. She led him to the security office. Her legs moved on instinct because her mind had temporarily stopped cooperating. The floor manager, a young man named Philip who had been with the company for 7 months and had no framework for what he was currently witnessing, pulled up the camera system without being asked. Tyler stood in the doorway. Chae-won stood at the monitor. He watched the footage once. The timestamp read 2:14 p.m. Elijah entered. Elijah moved through the store, direct, unhurried, purposeful. Elijah selected the headphones. Elijah walked toward the register. Elijah was intercepted. The entire sequence lasted 4 minutes and 31 seconds. There was nothing in those 4 minutes and 31 seconds that resembled, in any frame, from any angle, a theft in progress or a theft intended. There was only a child doing exactly what he had come to do. Chae-won watched the footage. He did not rewind it. He did not pause it. He watched it the way you watch something you already knew was true, not to be convinced, but to understand the precise shape of what had been done. Then he turned from the monitor and looked at Donna Hartwell with an expression that contained no anger. Anger would have been easier. Anger is legible. Anger gives the other person something to respond to, something to defend against, something to match or deflect. What Chae-won-oh's expression contained was something far more difficult to withstand. It was recognition. You stopped my son because he is black. Donna's mouth opened. The word procedure formed somewhere behind her teeth. The word protocol. The word policy. Every institutional shield she had ever used, every phrase that had ever allowed her to believe that what she did in that store was neutral and professional and blind to everything except behavior, all of it assembled itself in her throat. Don't. One word, and every shield dissolved. In the small room at the back of the store, Elijah Oh sat in a plastic chair with his hands folded in his lap and his backpack between his feet. He had not cried. He had decided not to. Not because he was not frightened. Not because the situation had not pressed against something old and deep inside him, but because his father had told him once that tears were not weakness, but that timing mattered. And this was not the time. When the door opened and he saw who was standing in the frame, he stood up. He crossed the room in 4 steps. He pressed his face into his father's side and held on. Chae-won-oh placed one hand on the back of his son's head. He did not say anything. He did not need to. The 100 men outside did not move. The store did not breathe. And for a moment that lasted much longer than a moment, the most feared man in 3 zip codes stood completely still and held a 9-year-old boy who had not cried. Then, very quietly, he asked, "Are you okay?" And Elijah, muffled against the black suit jacket, said, "I didn't cry, Dad. And Chaewon said, "I know you didn't." There is a version of this story that ends here. The father retrieves the son. The store is shamed into silence. The boy gets his headphones. Everyone goes home. The moment fades the way most moments of quiet injustice fade. Absorbed into the city, digested by the indifferent machinery of ordinary life, remembered only by the people it happened to, and forgotten by everyone else before the week is out. That version of this story does not exist. Because Chaewon-oh did not come to the tech zone to retrieve his son and leave. He came to retrieve his son, and to do something far more deliberate. Something that required no raised voice, no visible threat, no action that could be photographed and misrepresented. He came to make certain that what had happened to Elijah in that store would follow Donna Hartwell, and the store, and every executive whose name appeared on that building's lease, for a very long time. He walked Elijah out of the back room and into the main floor, one hand resting lightly on his son's shoulder. The store had gone completely quiet. The customers who remained, 3 of them, positioned at various points along the aisles, had stopped pretending to browse. Philip, the floor manager, stood near the register with his hands at his sides, and the particular expression of someone who has just understood that his employment history is being permanently divided into a before and an after. Chaewon stopped in the center of the floor. He did not look at Donna. He looked at Tyler, who was already on the phone, speaking in the low, efficient cadence of a man who makes calls that get answered on the first ring. Within 45 seconds, Tyler lowered the phone and gave a single nod. The legal machinery had already been set in motion. Not the machinery of violence, the machinery of documentation, of subpoena, of civil litigation and criminal complaint. Every camera in the tech zone would be requisitioned as evidence before the following morning. Donna Hartwell's employment records, her incident reports, her history of complaints filed and complaints dismissed would be in the hands of 3 separate attorneys before midnight. The store's corporate parent, a company with 17 locations and a carefully maintained public image, would receive the first of many calls from a law firm whose letterhead had a way of making public relations departments very quiet and very cooperative, very quickly. Chaewon-oh did not threaten any of this. He did not announce it. He simply allowed it to happen, the way a man who has spent decades understanding how power actually moves allows things to happen. Not through force, but through the precise and unhurried application of consequence. Then he turned to Philip. "I would like to make some purchases." Philip blinked. "Of course, sir. What can I help you find?" "Everything my son looked at today." There was a pause in which Philip processed this request and found that he did not have a procedure for it. "Everything?" "Every product in every section he passed through. Pull the camera timestamps. You have 40 minutes of footage. Use it." What followed was one of the stranger commercial transactions in the recent history of that particular store. Tyler produced a black leather document case. Philip moved through the store with a tablet and a growing list. The 3 remaining customers had by this point abandoned any pretense of shopping and were simply watching, phones discreetly angled, thumbs hovering. One of them, a woman in a yellow coat who had been in the store when Donna stopped Elijah and who had said nothing, done nothing, looked away in the particular way that people look away when they are choosing not to be involved, was now filming everything with the focused intensity of someone trying to retroactively correct a decision they cannot unmake. $14,030. That was the total. Paid in cash, counted onto the service counter by Tyler Baines with the unhurried rhythm of a man who has counted large sums in worse places than this. Every note placed face up, every stack aligned. Philip's hands were not entirely steady as he processed the transaction, but he processed it. Then Chae-won turned to Elijah, who had been standing quietly at his father's side through all of it, backpack still on his shoulders, watching everything with those wide, absorbing eyes. "Where do you want this to go?" Elijah looked at the growing collection of boxed products being staged near the door by two of the guards who had been permitted to enter. "The place? With the kids?" "The one in Harlem, yes." "Can we bring it ourselves?" "We can bring it ourselves." Elijah nodded once, with the gravity of someone ratifying an important decision. Then he looked at the box near the top of the stack, a pair of Sony headphones, white, $89, and looked at his father. He did not ask. He had been raised not to ask for things in public. It was one of the rules, unspoken but understood, that governed life in the O household. A rule born not from austerity, but from a philosophy about dignity and want, and the difference between needing something and performing need for an audience. But Chae-won saw it anyway. He saw it the way he always saw things, completely, immediately, and without being told. He picked up the box. He handed it to Tyler, who removed the headphones, checked them without being asked, and placed them in Elijah's hands. Elijah held them for a moment. Then he put them on. They were too large for his head. They slipped slightly to one side. He adjusted them with both hands, with the focused concentration of someone calibrating something important. The store was completely silent. Donna Hartwell stood near the back hallway where she had placed a 9-year-old boy in a room and told him to wait. She had not moved in several minutes. Her face had passed through several expressions and arrived at something that was not quite shame and not quite fear, but occupied the territory between them. The particular expression of a person who has, for the first time, seen the full shape of something they did and found they cannot make it smaller than it is. Nobody spoke to her. Nobody needed to. Outside, the 100 men in black suits remained at their positions on the sidewalk. The street had long since drawn a crowd. Pedestrians stopped, filmed, murmured. 3 news vans had appeared at the end of the block, drawn by the kind of instinct that news vans develop when a city block suddenly stops moving the way city blocks are supposed to move. Chae-won-oh walked toward the exit with his son beside him, and said nothing to any of them. He did not perform for the cameras. He did not issue a statement. He did not turn back to look at the store, or at Donna, or at Philip, or at the woman in the yellow coat who was still filming with the expression of someone trying to outrun their own conscience. He simply walked out into the afternoon with Elijah at his side, and the 100 men fell into formation around them, and for one suspended moment, Fifth Avenue went completely, impossibly still. Then Elijah adjusted the headphones again, looked up at his father, and asked the question that would eventually be seen, in one form or another, by 40 million people. There is something that happens to a moment when the world decides it matters. It does not happen immediately. It happens in stages. First a ripple, then a current, then something that moves with the force of water that has been held back too long and has finally found the place where the wall is thin. The woman in the yellow coat posted the video at 9:47 p.m. that night. She had edited nothing. She had added no caption, no context, no explanation. She had simply posted the footage, 4 minutes and 12 seconds of it, and written 7 words beneath it. He just wanted to buy some headphones. By midnight, it had been shared 60,000 times. By the following morning, 40 million. The video did not go viral because it was dramatic. It went viral because it was not. There was no shouting. There was no confrontation in the traditional sense. No moment where voices rose and things escalated in the way that footage of confrontation usually escalates. There was instead something rarer and more difficult to look away from. A child who had done everything correctly, a system that had failed him anyway, and a father who had responded with a precision and a restraint that made the injustice more visible, not less, because there was nothing around it to distract from its shape. People watched it the way people watch something they recognize, not because they had seen it before in exactly this form: the Korean Mafia boss, the adopted black son, the 100 silent men in suits, but because the architecture of it was familiar. The child doing everything right, the adult with authority deciding that doing everything right was not enough. The room that looked away. The moment that passed without intervention from anyone who might have intervened. That part people had seen before. Many of them had lived it. What they had not seen, what made the video spread the way it did, across platforms and borders, and the specific demographic lines that usually contain these conversations, was what came after. The footage of Chae-won-oh standing at the security monitor. The footage of the cash being counted onto the counter. The footage of the products being staged near the door. And then, at the 3-minute and 44-second mark, the footage that no one who watched it once watched only once. A 9-year-old boy putting on a pair of headphones that were too big for his head, adjusting them with both hands, looking up at a man in a black suit who was watching him with an expression that, on any other face, in any other context, might have been impossible to read, and asking, in a voice that the microphone caught just clearly enough, "Dad, why did you bring 100 people?" And the man who ran an organization that 3 separate federal agencies had spent 11 years trying to dismantle, the man whose name appeared in sealed indictments in 2 countries, the man whom every person on that block and in those SUVs and in that store understood on a cellular level to be someone you did not cross. That man looked at his son for a moment before he answered. And then he said, "Because you are worth more than 100 people." The clip of those 7 seconds was separated from the full video and shared another 90 million times. The consequences arrived in the order that consequences usually arrive. Not all at once, but in a procession, each one unlocking the next. Donna Hartwell was dismissed before noon the following day. The store's corporate parent issued a statement by early afternoon, carefully worded, legally reviewed, containing the word unacceptable 4 times and the word accountability 3 times, and conspicuously avoiding any direct description of what had actually occurred. The statement was screenshot, annotated, and dismantled on social media within 40 minutes of its release. A second statement followed, then a third, each one slightly more direct than the last, in the way that institutional statements become more direct in direct proportion to how much the first statement failed. 3 civil rights organizations filed formal complaints with the city's Consumer Affairs Division by the end of the week. 2 journalists who covered retail discrimination published investigations that used the TechZone incident as an entry point into a pattern of complaints, filed, dismissed, buried, that stretched back 7 years across the chain's locations. A former employee gave an interview in which she described a culture of profiling that had been reported internally and ignored. The word systemic appeared in 11 separate headlines in 4 days. None of this was orchestrated by Chae-won-oh. He made no further public statements. He gave no interviews. He did not appear on camera again after walking out of the TechZone with his son. His attorneys handled the legal proceedings with the kind of thorough, unhurried efficiency that suggested they had been given clear instructions and unlimited resources and no particular deadline. The civil suit moved through its early stages quietly and without the dramatic public declarations that such suits sometimes attract. Chae-won-oh simply disappeared back into the life he had before Tuesday, The meetings with no visible signage, the cars with tinted windows, the world that operated by rules entirely different from the ones posted on the walls of retail stores. He returned to it the same way he had left it, without announcement, without explanation, without asking anyone's permission. But something had changed, not in him, in the record. In the permanent, indexed, searchable record of what had happened on a Tuesday afternoon on Fifth Avenue. The record that now lived in servers and archives and the memory of 40 million people who had watched a child adjust a pair of oversized headphones and ask his father a question. On the Friday after the incident, Chae-won picked Elijah up from school himself. This was unusual. Tyler handled school pickup on most days, and Elijah had long since accepted this as simply the way things were, the way he had accepted many things about his life as simply the way things were. But that Friday, the black car was there when the bell rang, and his father was standing beside it, jacket unbuttoned for once, watching the doors. Elijah came through the doors with his backpack and his headphones, the white Sony ones, which he had not taken off for more than 8 hours at a stretch since Tuesday, and stopped when he saw his father. "You're here." "I'm here." They drove in the direction of Harlem. Elijah watched the city through the window with the headphones around his neck, not playing anything, just wearing them the way you wear something that has become important to you for reasons that are difficult to explain. After a few minutes, he said, without turning from the window, "At school today, Deshaun said his mom saw the video." "What did Deshaun say?" "He said his mom cried." Chae-won did not respond immediately. Outside, the city moved past in its usual register, noise and motion and the specific indifferent beauty of a place that contains everything and notices nothing. "Why did she cry?" Elijah asked. Not the way a child asks a question they don't know the answer to. The way a child asks a question they are still deciding what to do with. Chae-won looked at him for a moment. "Because she recognized it," he said. "Because she has seen it happen before, and she expected it to end the way it usually ends." "How does it usually end?" There was a pause. Outside, a light changed. The car moved forward. "Quietly," Chae-won said. "It usually ends quietly." Elijah turned from the window and looked at his father. He considered this with the particular seriousness that had always distinguished him, the quality that had made Chae-won notice him years ago, in a room full of children, as the one who listened to everything and spoke only when he had something to say. "But it didn't end quietly," Elijah said. "No. Because of you." Chae-won-oh looked at his son, at the headphones around his neck, at the backpack with the astronaut keychain, at the face that carried, in its lines and its expression and its particular quality of attention, the unmistakable imprint of someone who had been loved carefully and completely and without condition. "Because of you," he said. "It didn't end quietly because of you. You walked in. You did everything right. You did not let the room win. I only showed up." Elijah looked at him for a long moment. Then he turned back to the window. "Dad?" "Yes." "Can we stop and get something to eat before the orphanage?" Chae-won-oh looked at his son. And for the first time since Tuesday, since the 11-second phone call, since the 100 men, since the cash on the counter and the silent street, and the footage that had moved across the world like water finding its level, he smiled. Small. Real. The kind that does not perform itself for anyone. "Yes," he said. "We can stop." The car moved through the city. The headphones caught the afternoon light. And somewhere in the permanent, searchable, indexed record of what a Tuesday in Manhattan had become, a 9-year-old boy who had not cried sat beside his father and watched New York pass by like something that had tried to make him small and had not succeeded. It had not ended quietly, and it never would. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever done everything right? Followed every rule, crossed every line carefully, given no one any reason to doubt you, and still been made to feel like you didn't belong? And has anyone ever stood up for you in a moment like that? Or did it end quietly, the way those moments usually do? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about dignity, justice, and the kind of love that shows up with everything it has, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.